Hello, cruel world. What kind of conditions spawn terrorists? How are terrorists made? What are the individual personality traits and kind of psychological makeup of a terrorist? How and why are certain agencies really good at recruiting vulnerable young men to become terrorists? Should we let ex-terrorists back into the country? And should terrorists be classified as being mentally unwell? We will look at all of these questions and many, many more in this episode of Psych for Sore Minds. So this is extracts of an episode that I did for my boy Shaun Atwood on Atwood Unleashed, and I will be co-hosting an interview with a man called Nafees Hamid from the Terrorism and Organised Crime Unit at the University College of London. He is an expert in terrorism. So sit back, relax, enjoy the episode, and I shall see you afterwards. Cool. So, Nafees, obviously one of your areas of expertise is terrorism and organised crime. So, do you mind just giving us a very kind of brief overview of what makes a terrorist, what kind of conditions grow a terrorist, and then your thoughts on what we can do as a society to prevent that, please?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a lot of the same things that make usually someone who there's kind of like three ways someone can become a terrorist, right? The first two we have little control over, which is one, they're coerced into it. Someone's holding their family at gunpoint or something and saying, go carry out this act, which doesn't happen too often, especially not in the West, but it does happen. Then the other way is someone's kind of born into it. Again, not something you typically see in the West, but it happens. People just, their mothers and fathers were believed in a particular extremist ideology, and they're raised into that school of thought, just like anybody's raised into any school of thought, whether it's religious or political. But the most common way is that someone basically transitions into becoming an extremist later on in their life, usually early adulthood, and oftentimes it's young men who do it, but there's women as well. And for them, that's kind of the process is sort of typical to just any moral group, moral tribe change. When someone goes from being a Christian to a Muslim, someone goes from being a liberal to a conservative. The underlying psychology oftentimes is very similar. It's a person who feels disaffected from whatever group that they're in. They feel like they don't really belong, don't have a role or a fit, usually have some sort of blows to their esteem, a loss of job, relationships, and other things that put them on the identity market, that put them on the search for a new group. Now, whether they come in contact with a Buddhist monastery or whether they come in contact with neo-Nazis or jihadists, that says more about their social ecology than necessarily about their psychology. Yeah. That says more about the kinds of platforms that they're on, the kinds of friends that they already have, the kinds of recruitment networks that are present in their neighborhood and so forth.
Can I just ask, so a lot of the factors you're talking about are circumstantial and are environmental. Do you think there's also some personality traits, specific personality traits? So, for example, is the average terrorist particularly naive or like a high sensitivity towards criticism or easily influenced, would you say?
If there's any sort of stable trait that we've been able to find, it's usually they have more of an analytical mind. They actually tend to be the education that tends to be most represented amongst extremists, amongst terrorists, sorry, I should say, are people with engineering backgrounds and advanced engineering degrees, usually like master's degrees and so forth. Medical degrees and doctors are pretty common as well. So it kind of goes in the face of a lot of stereotypes we have that these people are dumb and so forth. Now, it's true that a lot of people do get recruited from marginalized, poor neighborhoods, but that's, I would say, more of a modern day phenomenon, especially with bigger terrorist groups. Al-Qaeda, for example, that was not the case. They were generally well above average in terms of income, in terms of education. Even Nazis in their original heyday were generally very highly educated people with engineering backgrounds. When a movement starts to pick up pace and popularity, then they sort of start recruiting more so-called foot soldiers, and you start having people from prisons and other areas getting pulled in to that movement. But if anything, the people who are the least represented in extremist networks are people who have backgrounds in the arts and humanities.
Okay.
And now the reason why we think that's the case, we don't know exactly. This could be a lot of reasons for why you see these patterns. But part of it is that an analytic mindset that you see amongst engineers or other people is a tendency towards binary thinking, a tendency towards, I need a right answer. I need what they call cognitive closure. I don't like this complexity and this gray area and this idea that let's just embrace the unknown and embrace the uncertainty, which people in the humanities, philosophy, or whatever, they love that stuff, right? They love being able to handle the mystery and the numinous and the unknown. We're talking about the religion of Islam, that would be more Sufi mysticism, basically, right? Whereas you start moving more towards Salafi jihadism, for example, that's where you start getting into the, no, we have exact, clear, right and wrong answers for everything. You follow these rules and you will be on the righteous path. That's the same for neo-Nazis and the same for other groups as well. So that might be an individual cognitive trait that could be particularly susceptible towards extremist ideas.
I was going to say, there seems to be an impression, quite a widespread impression, that most people that are kind of pushed or attracted towards terrorism come from depravity or poverty or don't see much of a future. But it sounds like that's actually not necessarily true. I mean, you're talking about people with engineering degrees, with medical degrees. So they have like quite a lucrative potential future ahead of them. So something huge must shift inside of them to potentially take their own lives or kill other people instead.
Well, again, yeah, like I said, it depends on what phase that particular movement is in at that moment. So like, look, Al-Qaeda was, before 9/11, Al-Qaeda had about 750 people total. It was not a big organization. Osama Bin Laden was not the commander we were making him out to be. He was a financier and basically a propagandist. He liked to talk, and so he was a nice target for American intelligence agencies and media to point the finger to before 9/11. Now, he did finance 9/11, even though it wasn't his idea. That was Mohammed Atta and other people who kind of planned and organized it. But after, and even slightly before and slightly after, Al-Qaeda was basically a clandestine network of individuals who were carrying out very targeted terrorist attacks around the world. They had what we call a networked cooperation structure, means small sleeper cells around the world that are going to maybe fly planes into buildings or blow up, a boat or something like that. And so they really needed to make sure that the people that they were getting involved were kind of like the equivalent of the special forces of the jihadist movement, people who were highly educated, had a lot of contacts, and people who they invited to their camps and spent a year training and usually doing some religious vetting. And so
it seems like they're really skilled at knowing exactly what to say to make vulnerable people just buy into their ideology, because they're not just saying, we've got this movement, come and join us. They're kind of encompassing the potential recruits into helping them out, I guess.
Well, usually there's someone that they know too. So usually when people are pulled into an extremist group, and it's like even when people change religions, it's oftentimes because they know someone who's a part of that other religion. So you're dealing with someone who's, we'd say recruiter, but it's not like somebody on the street just walking around recruiting you. I mean, that does happen, but it's very rare. It's usually a brother, a sister, a friend, someone you went to school with, someone you're hanging out with in prison, someone you've built up a little bit of a relationship with online. So they kind of know your psychology too, and so they know what buttons to press.
One of the questions in the comments from Paulie Walnuts, love that name, is more of a, I guess, a judgmental question than a scientific one. But he asked, should we let ex-terrorists back into the country, like Shamima Begum? What do you think?
It's a hard one. I mean, I don't think you should be stripping them of their citizenship, because it certainly starts sending a message that there's two kinds of citizens. There's those who have parents from another country whose parents maybe hold citizenship to another country versus those who don't, and therefore you have two classes of citizenship. So I think that's not appropriate. Ultimately, it was the country from where the foreign fighter came from. It was that country's failure, security failures, and so forth that allowed this person to get radicalized and to slip through the airports and make their way all the way to Syria and Iraq. Now, you could say, well, what about the Iraqi people or the Syrian people? Shouldn't they be able to get their justice by prosecuting that person in their own countries? We don't really trust the Iraqi system in terms of how they prosecute people and the information that they use. It's not even open in public. And who would do it within Syria? Would it be Assad? Would you send all the people over to him. I mean, I think most people who don't want them back probably don't consider him legitimate either. At least there's a legitimate legal system here, but then again, we don't really know exactly what everyone did when they were in Syria. The actual intelligence is really paltry. So there's a good chance people could come back and have serve a short-term prison sentence and be released back into society. Either way, I think if you do take them back or don't take them back, there has to be at least an open discussion in society about the risks. Because even if you can, I've worked on rehabilitation, reintegration of foreign terrorist fighters in different countries around the world, and it's difficult. It's not easy. There was one guy that I was working with who had been in prison over 100 times before he went to Syria. So when we're saying, how do we reintegrate this person? I was like, he was never integrated to begin with. So, I mean, are we going to throw massive resources in terms of mental health and social services on this one person so that way they don't, blow themselves up again or carry out an act? I don't know if that's always a wise decision, but yeah, I don't really have a clear answer to it. I just think we need to evaluate the real costs and benefits and be honest. And that's something that politicians and even other people in the media are not kind of just laying out for people the complexity of it. It's really complicated.
It is complicated. Did you have a question, Andrew?
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you actually, like in your job as a psychiatrist, have you come across extremists like that? And have you? I'm wondering. I guess this is a question to both of you about. I guess we were just saying, Nafees, about how these are actually. It's a mistake to think of these people as not intelligent. Are they often psychologically unwell? I suppose it's a question to both of you, so I don't know how you're going to both answer at the same time, but you can try.
Well, what I would say, so I assess mentally disordered offenders. That's what I do for a living. Do things like fitness to pleads, whether they're criminally responsible, and I have assessed a few people that have been charged with terrorist acts. It's quite rare; probably only happens once a year or so. And the vast majority of them don't have a recognizable mental illness. They probably have some traits of personality disorders, suggesting their personalities are flawed, but they don't have something like schizophrenia or a psychosis, the vast majority. I think I can only think of one case where somebody who is not recruited or affiliated with any kind of terrorist group or cell, he bought the ingredients to make a homemade bomb, and he was going to make one, but the police raided his flat. And he had a bee in his bonnet against the Citizens Advice Bureau, but that was driven by delusional beliefs, paranoid beliefs about them mocking him. But it's exceptionally rare. And I don't know what you think about this, Nafees, but I think it's dangerous to label your typical terrorist as being mentally ill, because they're not mentally ill. They're fully in control of their actions. They might be vulnerable, and as we've already discussed, they might have certain personality traits that make them more susceptible to be turned, but then they don't have symptoms of mental illness, which makes them less responsible or in control of their actions.
Yeah, no, I pretty much agree with that. There has been some research done by Dr. Paul Gill and others at University College London where they look at lone actors versus group actors, and they find that lone actor terrorists do tend to have a higher rate of previous mental health issues. But it's still a minority. It's still less than 50%. I don't remember the exact percentage, but it's still a minority of people. It's higher than group actors. Group actors tend to not have it at all. Those are, when I say group actors, I mean not only people who carry out a terrorist act in a group, but maybe even get radicalized in a group and then go overseas somewhere. So the lone actors do tend to have a little bit more mental health issues. But the problem with even the term mental health issues is that we're lumping a lot of categories together, which is everything from, like you were saying, psychosis, schizophrenia on the one hand, just to someone being a little bit depressed. And if someone's a little depressed, yeah, maybe they'll spend a lot more time on the internet than they would have, and they might go down certain rabbit holes. So it's not so much that depression is like a vulnerability to radicalism. It's that it put them into an online social context and kept them there for a long period of time. And what's funny enough is that some of the research shows that people who are depressed, when they start getting radicalized online, that's actually what starts to pull them out of the depression, because they're getting excited. They feel like they've discovered something, an online community, and now they feel like they have a purpose in this world, is to wake other people up to it. And for the majority of people, they won't carry out a terrorist act. They'll just stay online and become kind of keyboard warriors.
So, dear viewers, I hope you enjoyed that interview. If you're interested in this kind of area, I've done another video on my channel about a specific story of a terrorist, specifically Alexander 𝐏𝐻𝐡, who is known as one of the jihadi Beatles, and I kind of look at his background and his crimes and do a deep dive into the psychological makeup of terrorism. If you're interested in this whole generic area of mental illness and offending, that's my specialism. My name is Dr. Sohom Das. I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist. I assess mentally disordered offenders for a living so that you don't have to. If you check out my channel, you will see that there's a whole range, a smorgasbord of different videos, from individual cases like Alexander 𝐏𝐻𝐡 to other high profile cases, from murders to sexual assaults. And I do my own psychoanalysis of these perpetrators. Sometimes I talk about more generic kind of topics about criminality, individual mental illnesses, such as bipolar, schizophrenia, etc., etc. What I'm trying to say is there's something for everybody on this channel. Go check out my videos and please, please, please subscribe. But even more importantly than that, stay euthymic and do not forget, this is absolutely crucial, do not forget, I love you.